1. If Jaron gets stabbed in PIDC, the previous speaker tells you that he can become a resource speaker, or he can become hopeful, or he can become more strong in his faith. The problem with that is that if you guys don't know Jaron, he has a very weak moral and faith condition. That is to say, the point in which his priest or pastor tells him that it's God's plan is the point in which he's probably gonna get angry and defiant and shit on the church and shit on Catholicism and take me down with him, right? Someone who is rather morally upright with regards to the church. We think it's unfair for people to be blamed for their particular situations just because God wills it, and we think it's unfair to God too. God is not malevolent, He is not benevolent, He exists outside space and time, He has other God things to do. That's why when I POI'd earlier and I said, if Jaron got stabbed, how is that God's fault? Because last time I checked, it is nefarious actors who are mean and want to hurt Jaron. 3 issues in my speech. Why should pastors deprioritize God's plan? Number 2, why should this deprioritization be important, and how can we get a better degree of structural reform that side opposition also agrees with? And thirdly, how are people better off when they adopt a narrative of deprioritizing God's plan? This is me co-opting and flipping the idea of hope. Firstly, a couple of responses against the previous speaker. They said that it's not the church's fault, it's not your fault, it's the state's fault, right? But we think, my friend, the solution to that isn't to continue hoping or saying things like, God wills it, God condones it, it's part of His plan. Because frankly speaking, it's probably not. The reason why we have agency and free will as people, regardless of what religion or ethnicity or thing you want to believe in, is precisely because we're here in this world to do cool things with the limited time we have. So, the question then becomes, which side opposition has not yet answered, how is that choice able to be made better on your side, the point in which you already give it meaning and agency? You demonize religion, you demonize faith, you demonize God when you ascribe to that particular being something someone did. Whether it be what I told you in my speech that someone stole, or whether what I told you in the POI that someone stabbed Jaron, or whether it be what they told you that it's other things, it's the state, we need to hold the state accountable. Secondly, they told you action is important and they want to be able to mobilize change. We wholeheartedly agree with that. We question the lens of that change actually happening, the point in which you ascribe God's plan to it. Because it's on your side that change probably doesn't even happen. And as LO already conceded earlier in the round, is that there are instances where it's hopeless. So I'm telling you, at the point in which it's hopeless, why exactly are you going to hope more? It doesn't make the problem go away. Why are we able to get mobility on our side? Because people get angry. People foam in the mouth. People start being inspired by the community dictated by the pastor to finally look against their own situation and say, it's not my fault, I'm working hard, it's that greedy guy's fault, it's that politician's fault, it's that bad guy's fault. And that exactly is what religions have to do. They cannot keep being nice and hiding under the veil of being anonymous. They need to keep in check their morality. Third, they said it's a last resort. But we think that's a very shallow kind of last resort at a point in which it already contradicts what the first speaker said, that there are instances where it's hopeless. So last time I checked, if I continue hoping and giving meaning to something that is otherwise pointless, that's what Einstein said is the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing and expecting a particularly different result. Why do we win this debate coming from first speaker of Affirmative, which was me? Number 1, it's because hope is a harm in this debate. It's not something that is sits on their side, and it's not something symmetric, because we think Hope only works if there's something to be hopeful about. That is to say that if the situation is not as bleak as what opposition paints it to be, then there needs to be some sort of structural reform. There needs to be some sort of change to be able to challenge that. And people are just less likely to cater change because they get sort of meaning. That's why in my speech earlier, I talked to you about toxic Filipino resiliency, which we see time and time again coming in typhoons. Yes, we're able to get by, but are we really able to transcend? Are we really able to see structural reform? I don't think so. We continue voting in the same shitty politicians with their crappy dances and all of these things, hoping that something might be different, but that hope is not probabilistic in our nature. But let's take what they said, right? That there's no hope. Why is it worse on their side? It's worse on their side because you accept that situation and you put yourself at a state of hopelessness. Meaning, how many Filipinos died in the typhoon at a point in which they were hopeful that God wills it? Sure, these people might go to heaven, but it locks people, as what Jaron said, in systems of intergenerational disenfranchisement and disadvantaged situations. Meaning, the reason why my father was poor, I'm poor, and why my child continues to be poor is precisely because we keep ascribing God's plan at any point in which it's convenient, at any point in which it helps us. Secondly, right, why do we win this? Very simple. Proximity to the structural problem and probability to succeed. Don't let opposition get away with gaslighting you in terms of saying that, what Joseph and Jaron are saying is that when you work and when you do these things, it'll be solved. I'm not entirely sure if it'll work, but I do know that the counterfactual won't work at the point in which you already consider it's hopeless. So, it's outcome dependent on something actually happening. Meaning, if there is some semblance of hope, up which is the most proximate side to be charitable to their side, you need people to be angry. You need people foaming in the mouth. You need pastors lobbying these people together to be able to hold the greedy accountable, the haves and have-nots, and not lock up people in systems of oppression, because we think the point in which you say there's no hope is the point in which it becomes a vicious cycle. A vicious cycle that perpetuates this inequality, and this inequality perpetuates intergenerational harm for people having a crappy life on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, if we want a proximate shot at being able to change structural reform, we can't blame ourselves, we can't blame our community, and of course, we can't blame God. And for all of these reasons, we are very proud to stand on side government.